I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, March the 1st, brought to you in part by B&B Livestock Supply and Trailers in Camp Point, Illinois. It's your go-to place for everything: cattle, hay, feed, and fence equipment, all kinds of trailers. If you're living in that part of the country and you're not shopping there for your equipment, you need to start. For more information, go to bblst.com. Got an interesting feeder flash for you. It's a seller's market. Any class of cattle is at, if not all-time record highs, it's getting close. And we're nearing those all-time record highs as we go. We still got a ways to go on our yearling feeders. We're probably going to hit that this spring or summer. Our fat cattle now are less than $10 away from all-time record highs, but historically we are on a peak, guys. Your slaughter cows are bringing big money. Everything is bringing big money. And if you've got cattle to sell, you're going to be happy when you take them there. The problem is the input costs have been so high on whatever you've been raising, it's going to take a lot of the fun out of it. In fact, in the northern plains, there's a lot of cattle that are hitting the show list and being sold here the last several weeks and coming up the next several weeks. Those cattle, a lot of them should be making $200 a head. But due to the winter storms and the mud and everything that's been going on, everything getting higher, like I said, your input costs getting higher, instead of those cattle penciling to make $200 a head, a lot of those cattle are still losing money because the cost of gains are so high. It's not so bad in the southern plains, other than the extreme winds. We've had pretty good weather this winter down here, and that's one reason that we're seeing an interest in the southern plains feeding. They did not sell a hoof last week because they know that their cattle are worth more money, and so they're going to hang tough. See what they get done this week. It's going to be more than what they were asking last week. Talk about other cattle, other places. Now, the whole North America is tight on cattle right now. Mexico had a horrible drought. They have been reeling from deep culling, having a hard time feeding their cows down there. They actually held back a lot of their calves and didn't sell them in the fall like they normally do. But we have seen higher imports out of Mexico so far this year than what we did a year ago. But they're not cheap, guys. They've held those cattle back. They knew that they were due some more money, so they're bringing those cattle now when demand is big. And you talk about direct imports coming across from Mexico. They're based on a 300-pound steer, and as you get heavier weights from those, they're just on a slide. But 300 to 400-pound steers coming across from Mexico last week, selling from $222 to $232. Now that's not for nothing or anything, and it's a lot of freight to get them where they're going, but they don't die. And guys like that, and for the most part, they're not getting any kind of a discount whenever they sell them fat. We don't typically see anybody selling Mexican imports to backgrounders or somewhere in between, taking possession of them at the border and selling them fat. Most of your feedlots and your cattle feeders that feed Mexican cattle, they bring them in as lightweight calves. They do the backgrounding themselves, they feed the cattle, and they sell them on the fat cattle market with no discount. Because most of them are in a sweetheart deal. The packers know that they've got Mexican cattle. They don't really care because we don't have any truth in labeling, so they just buy those cattle right along. At the Santa Teresa cattle auction right there at the border, those are cattle coming across. They have those auctions on Saturday. Those cattle are coming across, coming into the United States. They had a package of 425-pound steers last week, bring 225. Like I said, they're not for nothing. You go north of the border, and it's even more so. Canada's extremely tight on numbers. They have been buying feeder cattle out of our auctions and in the country and out of our videos and sending them north, and they've got to go through a lot of protocol to get them up there. Can't cuss the Canadians. They take feeder cattle and they're gone. And they slaughter them in their plants, and then they get rid of the meat up there. And they are one reason that we are extremely tight on feeder cattle, because they have been buying a lot of feeder cattle up there, guys. But feeder cattle, we don't see a lot of feeder cattle coming down from Canada, at least right now, with extremely tight supplies north of the border and south of the border. Looked at end of last week, your year-to-date imports of feeder cattle out of Canada since January 1st has only been 15,000. That's not that big. I mean, sometimes Oklahoma City will have 15,000 in 1 week, and that's year-to-date 15,000 head of feeders, and that's about half what they imported up to now compared to last year. So extremely tight numbers. I talked to some of my friends up in Canada here this last week, and talked to one that sold some steers in Lethbridge, Alberta. Now these steers weighed 592 pounds. Stalker type steers. They bring $338.25 Canadian. Now that's $2,002 a head Canadian. You revert that back to US dollars, that's $1,468 a head in US dollars, or $248 a pound for something weighing nearly 600 pounds. We don't see that here, guys. So they're extremely tight on numbers. Talked to one of my favorite people that I made quick friends with on a couple of trips up to Canada. He's been down to the United States, and I met up with him, and I won't mention his name to protect the innocent, but he's kind of a shy guy anyway, especially when the ladies come around. But he texted me the other day and told me that he sold his grass steers coming off grass in September to weigh 1,000 pounds at $260. Now that's $2,600 Canadian. You revert that back to US, and you know, it's a lot of money, guys. But it's amazing what these cattle will bring, guys. And I asked him, I said, Darcy, have you started buying the cattle yet? And he said, don't you worry. He said, I've got them in a pen. I'm getting them along. Can't wait to turn them out on grass. But serious prices being paid north of the border. They're some of the top buyers west of the Rockies in the United States. In my time at Fallon, Nevada, and some of the barns up in there, I see those Canadian buyers coming in, and they are in there competing, bidding competitively with good demand, sending those cattle north. And like I said, they've got a lot of hoops to jump through to get them up there, but they're good customers of ours. Let's talk about the board for Wednesday, or for Tuesday, excuse me. February live cattle futures up 250 to go off the board at 167.50. That's a premium to what we've seen trade so far, and most likely a premium to what we'll see trade this week. But it's been kind of leading here the last few weeks here on your February live cattle contract that left the board at 167.50. Your April contracts were up 50 cents at 165.47. That's going to be in there tight with what we're going to see on a weighted average in your 5-area feeding region this week, I think. But your back months were all up from 27 cents to up 60 cents. March feeder cattle up 62 cents because corn was down again at 189.80. April up 85 cents at 195.07. Back months on feeder cattle all higher too, from up 37 to up 90 cents. Corn, all of a sudden, we've talked about that recently, about corn all of a sudden falling out of bed. We've just gone from focusing on how tight our numbers were on the last old crop, and now we're looking at the new crop, and we're seeing all this snow sitting around, all this moisture everywhere, and guys are getting kind of bearish on the corn all of a sudden, and in a serious way. They were down big last week, been down big so far this week. Tuesday down 13.25 cents at 629.5 a bushel. March beans down 27.75 cents at 1490.5. Your fat cattle trade kind of snipping around, starting to hear a few deals here and there. It's going to be higher again, guys. We're in a seller's market, like I said, to start this report. We did see Iowa have 1,000 head confirmed at 165. We had a deal or two at 165 last week, but that was not the market. But 165 so far this week. Nebraska nor the Southern Plains traded a hoof yet. Talked to them in the Southern Plains. They're asking for 166, and that's what it's going to take to trade. If they hang on anymore, it's liable to get higher than that. But if the big packers would come across with 166, it would buy a lot of cattle. Last week's show list and this week's show list likely at 166. Saw a competitive auction market at Stockman's Livestock in Yankton, South Dakota. They sell a lot of fat cattle there. That's our biggest and best fat cattle auction, brick and mortar in the United States. Quality was up this week. They had 3,200 head for receipts. Conventional type cattle, just regular cattle, no bells and whistles, bringing from 162 to 166 in an auction ring, $3 to $5 higher. Drug-free, non-implanted cattle, your program type cattle, bringing from 164.5 all the way up to 171 on some clean cattle up there that were drug-free or had no implants. A lot of participation from your smaller regional type packers all the way to your big boys up there at Stockman's Livestock in Yankton, South Dakota. Talk about your box beef cutout values. They were a little bit higher on the choice, up 61 cents on Tuesday afternoon at $288.95. Selects were absolutely unchanged at $279.25. Slaughter's looking good for this week. It was a little disappointing last week, but looking good this week. Through the first 2 days of this week, 250,000 harvested. That's up 19,000 from last week, down just 2,000 from the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. I talked about B&B as our main sponsor to begin this report. Secondary sponsor also B&B out of Camp Point, Illinois, but it's B&B Building Systems. They're all about the hoop buildings, guys. And if you've seen or know people that have hoop buildings, they're very, very handy, very good for cattle, equipment, whatever you want to put under them to keep them safe and keep them protected there. They do turnkey hoop buildings with a 20-year warranty there, guys. If you want more information for B&B Building Systems, go to bbbuildingsystem.com. Talk about your feeder cattle market, your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Tuesday, based on an 800-pound steer up through your middle 12 states on a cash auction steer, 185.60, up 190 on Tuesday after being down a little bit on your Monday sales. And it all has to do with the corn being down, guys. It just gives them a little more breathing room to dig in on those feeder cattle. And your real-time index is leaving the CME cash feeder cattle index behind. Latest reported at 182.62. Talk about your big sales on Tuesday. Ozarks Regional Stockyard, West Plains, Missouri. 2,500 head through the ring. Over 1,000 on their in-house video that they do with dvauction.com. Having a lot of success with that. But an active market right there in the barn. Feeders were $2 to $4 higher. Steer calves $7 to $14 higher. They have a lot of those old crop stockers in there, the little bit of Continental Cross in them, the kind that will just explode when you put them out in the Flint Hills or somewhere. They've got some good grazing, and guys are flocking in there to buy them, and they're battling on them. Heifer calves steady to $4 higher. Your Zoetis stick-out sale of the day come out of Kimball Livestock Exchange in Kimball, South Dakota. 4,000 head for them. Basically had two well-tested weight groups. It was a 7 and 8 weight group there on feeder steers. 1,326 head of 7 weight feeder steers in Kimball, South Dakota. They averaged 748. Weighted average price on all of them, $199.33. Very impressive. 1,094 head of 8 weight feeder steers in Kimball, South Dakota. Averaged 848 pounds with a weighted average price on nearly 1,100 head of $188.31. Wow. Give you some interesting top quotes from all around the region. How about Kingsville Livestock Auction in Kingsville, Missouri? They sell 79 heifers, weigh 702 for $190.85 to go to feed. Miles City Livestock Commission in Miles City, Montana. 58 head of 526-pound steers bring $261. How about Kimball Livestock Exchange on an individual quote? 123 head, 861 pound steers bring 191.75. My goodness. But the top quote that I saw anywhere, and it was late in the day because it was way out west, your Mackerson no BS top quote for the day come out of Toppenish Livestock Commission in Toppenish, Washington. You know they've had moisture out in that part of the country. I talked to Troy Frazier out there. He tells me about a load of heifers. They were hayed or winter hayed, just raised up there and slowly backgrounded on some hay. They had all kinds of condition on them. Heifers, 89 head, weigh 629 pounds at $224.50 to go to feed. And that's your feeder flash for Wednesday.